Now, to fill that all with some life, we need some data. We need some dummy events. Now, later in this course, we will learn how we can fetch data from a database or from the file system, but we haven't learned about this yet, and therefore for the moment, we'll just use a dummy JavaScript array as a data source, but again, that will of course change throughout the course. Nonetheless, for the moment, attached you find a dummy-data.js file attached to this lecture, and you can download this file and add it to your root project folder. So here I added dummy-data.js to my project next to the package.json file, and this is a file with an array of dummy data which I prepared for you, and with some functions that allow us to query that data. And I'll dive into those functions once we start using them. Now, in that dummy-data.js file, this dummy data, which is set up there, also uses some images. It also needs some images to be part of the project to then later correctly display our events. And therefore, you also need to add a couple of images to your project. Now, for that, you can use any images you want. Just make sure that you do store them in the same folder I will store them in a second, and that you give them the same name. But you can then use any images you want. A great source, if you don't know where to get images from, is unsplash.com. There you can get free images, and that is where I will collect a couple of images. For example, if you search for programming, I'll use this image from James Harrison. And in my project, in the public folder now, I'll add an images subfolder and download and store the image in there. This coding event JPEG file now. And make sure you name your file also coding-event. So download any image you want, maybe also this one, but name it coding-event and store it in the images folder. Or if you named it differently or have a different extension, go to the dummy-data.js file and adjust this image path appropriately. So the image name and extension. And with that, I'll collect 2 more images for my other 2 pieces of dummy data. For the next one, I'll search for introvert, because the next event is about introverts, just so that you don't have a strange impression of me. And here, I'll pick this image from Ahmed Nishat, and you can download this one as well, and store this in the images folder. In my case, under a name of introvert-event.jpg. Again, if you have a different name, adjust it in the dummy-data.js file appropriately. And last but not least, you can search for networking on Unsplash, and then you might also find the same image I'm using here. This image here about a networking event, as it seems, which I now also downloaded and stored here. But again, you can of course use any images you want. So now we got the dummy data and we got the images set up. And it's important that the images are stored in the public folder. It doesn't have to be a folder named images then. It can be any folder or directly in the public folder. But you should store them in the public folder because the public folder also is a special folder in Next.js projects. Whatever is stored in there, typically images or fonts or something like this, is then served statically by Next.js. Which means you can reference it in your CSS code or in your HTML code. You can easily include images stored in the public folder because Next.js will make sure to serve any content that's stored in the public folder as part of your overall application. So it will statically serve any content in there. It makes the content in there available to the visitors of your website, and therefore you can easily then embed public content in your HTML code and so on. And we will utilize that throughout this course. Therefore, now we got the images and the dummy data in place. Let's now start working on those page components and let's fill them with some life.